Let's talk money.
I don't have your money.
I know I'd be a lot happier with some extra cash.
Is this about money?
Obviously, this is all about money.
Oh, man, we got bills to pay, buddy.
With practical tips and a focus on scripture, let's talk money. With Dave and Reb. From More Than Enough. Real conversations about money for real people. Let's talk money.
Are you ready to talk money, Reb?
I am so ready today. Yeah, there's like 12 pages of show notes.
You woke up and was like, I am ready for
I am ready
show.
for this conversation. What if I told you that we're going to talk about a really unfaithful steward from the Lord of the Rings? His name's Denethor, and how that relates to our understanding of investing.
No wonder you're so excited. Your favorite movie, you're like stewarding, talking about stewarding Denethor, one of your favorite non-characters or however you
He's a character.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a character, but he's not like your favorite character.
No, he's very unfaithful to his role and call. Yes. And then we have our favorite guest, Brent Vandermeer from Crosspoint Vandemeer. I shouldn't say he's our favorite guest. That is terrible. I better one of our favorites.
So, welcome to the show, favorite Brent.
And anyway, we're going to talk about Denethor in a minute, but we want to give a shout out to the Canadian National Christian Foundation. You always do a better job at announcing them.
Would you like me to introduce the CNCF or the Canadian National Christian Foundation? First of all, we want to say thank you. As you know, if you've heard the show and if you're new to the show, then welcome. We want to welcome you. And if you've heard the show many times, you can find it on YouTube and Spotify and all of the podcasting platforms. You can find it on morethanenough.ca. You can find it on notmine.ca. And then, of course, we're recording from the studios at CHRI. So you can get it on chri.ca too. And we can't do all of that, have it in all those places without CNCF, the Canadian National Christian Foundation. If you don't have an estate plan, if you're like, I don't want to think about what happens when I pass away, that's fine, but you need to talk about what happens to your stuff. And the CNCF is the one to talk to. They will help you create a plan that will actually give you a plan and a path for the stuff that you have when you pass away in your end of life.
And that
plan.
involves charitable giving as well. And they're really great.
I hope so.
Well, we're just going to say that. We're just going to assume that's what's going to happen.
That in there. So,
but yes, so there's this guy named Denethor who's actually the steward of Gondor. The king's away. He's not taking care of, he's supposed to take care of the kingdom, but the evil and the war is coming and it's so big and he's just getting more and more fearful. And he is looking into the seeing stone, which is directly attached to Sauron. And Sauron is the guy who wants to undermine the whole race of man.
Okay. He's the bad guy.
He's the bad guy. Yeah. And he is getting so overcome by evil. It's lie upon lie. And you're thinking, what does this have to do with Brent Vandermeer today? Because Brent is not like Denethor at all. And I guess when we were praying about the show before, it just, this character in the Lord of the Rings just drops his responsibility. He looks to the lie. He feeds himself with information that's just leading him on a path that causes him to drop his stewardship, to lead his men into fear. Mm-hmm. And he forgets where they have come from. He forgets his role. And I was thinking about him because Brent has come today from Crosspoint Financial. He's a financial advisor. He's been on the show before, but he has helped, his team has created a document that is full of truth and information and education and will help us turn our gaze from all the lies, from all the fraud, the scams, and really look at what is investing. How can I steward the savings I have and practice my investing muscle? And I guess I'm kind of selfish in inviting him here today because I always want to learn more. And I feel like I'm just not smart when it comes to the language around investing or what to do. And sometimes we just put our money back into More Than Enough and not into that investing pool. But I guess in some way I am investing in our own business. But you've just, Brent, have done this great thing with your team to create a document that's 25 pages long, literally is called A Beginner's Guide to Investing. And for today and next week's show, we want to talk about what's in here to help people understand what can feel very scary, what can feel like it's a misunderstood area for some of us. So I want to thank you for coming.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's always so good, and especially so good to be your favorite guest.
Okay. I'm not going to live that one down now.
Wow, no. But it is so good to be here, and thank you for what you guys do, because you do such good for the city, for the reach of this podcast, just speaking about truth with debt, and savings, and all the coaching you do. It's a wonderful service.
Thank you. So you've created this document for us to help. And in the guide, it outlines 5 things that we can do to build this do-it-yourself plan. I guess the acronym is DIY, which I find a very frustrating acronym, but that's another story. So do-it-yourself plan. So we're going to look at purpose, risk, the assets, like in their conversation, accounts, like how do we manage it? How do we, make the plan? How do we learn and understand? And that's what we're going to focus on today. So,
the basis of why we did this is we've had so many people come to us who are just starting out. And what's a challenge in the financial world is that a firm like ours makes revenue based on what we manage. And so if the portfolio values are very small, there's no capacity for firms like us to take on every single person who comes to us. And so we felt like we would be sending people out into the world without really enough guidance, right? And you just hope they find a way, right? And we kind of give them some ideas. But Ben from my team, a really incredible guy, said, why don't we build this guide? And I'd actually asked him to say, can you put like a 1 or 2 pager together? Well, he comes back with 25 amazing pages. I thought, wow, I think it's really good. Like, I think this guide, I'm hoping is going to be useful for people that we can say, okay, we can't necessarily serve you, but here's a few things to learn. And people would often say to us, well, what book should I read? Where should I go? Right? Yeah. And that's good. There's a few books that, in fact, maybe we'll adjust this in time by adding a few things people could read. But I also find people wouldn't do it, or there isn't one great book that just gives them the answers, right? And
talking about who this is for, we also get lots of inquiries, and actually parents that you're listening, because we may not have the 19, 20, 21-year-old, but we talk about compound interest and we talk about investing early in life because time is in your benefit. And then we don't really tell them how or what, right? So if you're 20, 18, 20, 25, this is a 25-page document that you could go through step by step and start to actually educate yourself for a lifetime, right? And if you're a parent and you're going, what could I give my child who's just, I'd really like them, he's starting or she is starting to make money, and we'd like to introduce them to savings. But part of savings, and we have this discussion, part of savings is if the money is there, then have it work for you. We want it to not just sit there, and not grow. We'd actually like to use some of the tools and the mechanisms that will help it to grow. And as a young person, like I said, you have time on your side to do that. So I see this as well as a tool for those that are just, hey, I know I'm just starting. I'm young and I want to learn and get some information. And, when we talk about the market out there, Brent, you mentioned that there's so many places which you don't necessarily want to take they don't want to take their advice. As you said, Rebecca, looking into the seeing stone and not seeing truth, right? And this is one of those areas. So,
right.
And this document will help us know hopefully, I mean, the scams out there we could talk for a whole show on that. Yeah. They're just undermining, as you've already shared with some of your clients, or some folks that are calling you for advice. Like, the scams are real and they sound so good. So this document is here to help us. And we're just grateful that your team has put this together. So, and we're hoping that we can share it with our with anyone who wants. We'll give you access to the link to the document and to the radio shows again to listen to. So why don't you start, Brent, just by taking that, the first thing we have to do is understand and learn what is investing. So if you give us a high level definition of what that is.
Right. So I think, that's the foundation behind why we're doing something is really important, because it'll protect people from the scams, for example, of which usually has an insidious sort of nature of greed comes into our mind. We think, I can make a quick dollar. Look at this. This looks so good. I'm going to do this. Or things like we don't seek the counsel of wise people, right? We just do it on our own.
Right.
That's usually when you fall into trouble.
Yeah.
And so building a foundation of knowledge, of understanding what is true investing. And I use that word on purpose because saving is a little different, right? Saving is like putting some money aside for a rainy day, building your emergency fund, keeping it in cash or GICs or different things like that. Safe stuff, right? Investing is saying, I don't need this money right now. I am foregoing consumption today to put money aside so that it will grow to provide a greater sum of money or an income from that sum of money in the future. And many people who have a pension plan, someone's doing that for them, right? It's forcing the money off their paycheck into the plan. And then they don't have control over how that money is invested. But if you looked into the pension plan, you would see a diversified portfolio, a mix of, that is invested, right? Into safe, long-term, like interest-bearing debt instruments, commonly called bonds, or equity ownership of investments, businesses for long periods of time that they get held and they grow this money. And so we'll get into some of that later. But the gist of what is investing, and I think we talked about this a little bit the last time I was on, the core principle that I think a lot of people forget, and I'll just say what they kind of think about first, in this day and age of online gambling, and I mean, you look at the ads are everywhere now. Gamble this on hockey. You don't just watch a hockey game. It's not as exciting anymore to watch a hockey game. It's more exciting when I can gamble on the outcome of the hockey game, or who scores what goals, or in what periods, at what time of the game. And it's like, it's incessant. And this is something that's becoming more passionate of mine. I'm really upset by all of this. I really think it's changing our brains to this dopamine fix again and again in so many different ways. And it's also, frankly, it's a tax on people that shouldn't be paying more tax. And it's so obvious of why that is. The average, the stats on who participates in gambling, even lotto tickets, it's the people on average with lower than the median income levels. And the statistics are so clear. You are not going to win. And half that money goes to governments. And so it's this blatant tax on the poor that shouldn't be the case. And yet we don't talk about it, right? So investing has that little bit of, some people today are seeing it as a gamble. And that is not God-based. It's not wisdom-oriented. Investing is, I go back to what I was going to say, the connection of one's savings that they don't need, connecting it to someone or some entity that is growing a business generally in some way to provide a service, a good, or something that they need that capital to grow. Okay. And that's all we're doing. We're saying, I don't need this today. I'm going to buy investment of equity ownership in a business that needs it to grow, or I'm going to lend that business money as a loan so that they can grow. And I hope to get that money back at some point in the future, either with an increased value if the business goes up in value, or via interest payments on this debt, this loan that I'm getting paid for. And I'll get my money back at the maturity of that debt. That's really it. At the end of the day, it gets a lot more complex. But at the core of it, it's connecting excess capital from savers to businesses or entities that need it to grow and do something hopefully productive and for the good of society. Right?
Yeah, and I want to throw in there, because we talk about Bible and the relationship between Scripture and God, and this is one of the fundamental. When God says in the Old Testament, the borrower is slave to the lender, but also that he says, I want you to be the head and not the tail. And we've heard those verses before. I want you to lend to nations and not borrow from. And so when we talk about investing, we're really talking about that part, even in Scripture where God's saying to his people, this is what I want. I want you to be investing in things that are going to bring the kingdom, things that are going to make the world a better place. And so, it is really a challenge to us, his people, to say, how are you using those resources? Don't consume everything today. Again, scripture talks about consumption and saying, don't consume everything today. Invest it in something that is in the future that is going to make the world a better place.
Because you're thinking like just long term. It's one of the statements in the document is investing is a process of putting money to work today so it can grow or produce income for a future goal. Because and that's what we normally think of our retirement years, or when we don't have the physical strength to do all that work. We're thinking ahead and we're doing some planning.
But I also love the dual part of it to say, not only are we kind of taking care of ourselves, which is right, but we're also investing in businesses that are changing the world, that are doing what they've been called to do. You invest in a hospital and it's going to heal, it's going to be involved in the healing of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people over a period of time. And by the way, my future is I'm going to be able to not exchange time for money somewhere down the road. So there's that duality to it as well.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the next part, one of the things you talk about needing us to learn and understand is the difference between stocks and bonds. And I know that you've been here before to talk about that, but could you just give us an overview?
Yeah, it follows on from the idea of you're going to lend money to a business. And if you're lending it, you're getting a promissory note. We call that a bond, right? That says, I will pay you back in a certain period of time, and I will pay you an interest payment between now and then. And then your value becomes from that income stream over that time. It's a mortgage if you're thinking of that in terms, but the opposite. Now you're the lender, which is not the bank. You're just giving money over a term with a set schedule of interest payments.
And that's a bond.
That's a bond.
Okay.
So a bond is a loan to a business.
Okay.
Or a government or anyone who's borrowing, right?
Okay.
And you're hoping then that business that you've lent to does well, right? Because if they don't, they may not pay you back. Right? That's what the bank looks at a household when they're giving them a mortgage on their house. It's like, do they pass the credit checks? Do they? Yeah, we will lend to them. Or no, we will not lend to them. Well, as an investor, that's what you're doing. You're saying, am I going to lend money to this place? And so there's all different categories of risk in bonds, from governments being very safe generally, down to really big corporations that are almost like governments, down to smaller and smaller corporations that may represent more risk. So the more risk you take, the higher your interest rate should be, right? To compensate you for that risk you take. So you can build part of your portfolio should be a mix of these bonds, and they can vary in risk and duration and all of those things. The equity side, a stock, is essentially saying, instead of lending money to a business, I'm going to be able to buy a little piece of ownership of that business. And that's what a share is. You have a share in, or a stock, right? Is a share of ownership in that business. And the business sometimes wants to do that because them taking on debt might not actually be good for their business model, right? It has cash flow requirements to it. It has a repayment at the end of it. And so businesses sometimes say, I'd rather sell part of myself out to other investors, take that cash, grow the business per our plans. And then if it works out the way we hope, the size of the business is now grown such that even though the original owners own less percentage of this business, the size of the pie has grown, that their investment has gone up in dollar value, even though they own less.
Right.
And it allows to fund that growth, the services, the things you talked about, Dave, about a lot of businesses are doing really great things. And so that serves the community, that serves our society with growing products and services.
So an example of that, just because I'm in the mortgage business, but we deal with credit unions, and that is one of the requirements of actually getting a loan through a credit union here in Ontario, and is that you become a shareholder. It costs anywhere usually from $1 to $25. This is your first share. And, I love that, because when we're talking about that, is in a sense, you're buying a share of the bank that you're borrowing money for your mortgage. So they pay you a dividend, at the end of the year. So you can say, hey, you can buy more shares. You have to only buy one to become a member. But that's the model is as you use their service, the only way you can use their service is to become a member, which means you're really investing in that credit union, in that bank. And so, the whole, again, that's just their model. And I kind of like that in the finance industry.
Yeah,
so
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So we'll get to this more later, the details of how you mix those two together. But before we get into that, the whole part of understanding, which is what the first part of this guide is talking about, is saying you also need to define what your goal is. If you think back to the pension example, that excuses people from figuring out what their goals are, right? Because a pension plan typically says, okay, by age 65, we will pay you this much a month if you keep working for us and contributing to the plan. If you wanted to retire earlier at 60, we will pay you a smaller amount, but we will guarantee that for the rest of your life, no matter how long you live. So that's goal setting, right? That's basically saying, that's defining the outcome in advance. And then the pension plan has to figure out how they take all of their pensioners' contributions, how they invest it, how they grow it, so that it can pay out all of those monthly payments across all of their pensioners. Right. Well, if you're doing it yourself because you don't have a pension plan, you need to spend the time to figure out, what is my goal? What am I going to try to achieve at the end of this whatever timeline, right? And so a lot of people skip that step. It's like building a house without a blueprint, basically, right? Like, where am I going? What am I doing? What are the dimensions?
Yeah,
right?
So good.
And so why that is, I don't really know. I think there's some elements of people just don't want to know. They just, I hope it'll work out. I'll just try to put aside some money and hope it'll be okay. Well, that instills this fear in people of, do I have enough? Like, will I ever have enough? Am I going to be okay? And I think that's the number one fear that I hear from people is, am I going to be okay? Right. And so proper planning and setting the foundation will hopefully give some sense. We won't be able to eradicate those fears. Like that's just human nature of not knowing the future. Right. But we can try to at least define where we're going.
Yeah. It's kind of like shooting an arrow, but not having a target really. So you're just pinging these arrows off into the, going, oh, look at how far that went, but not really knowing what impact it's going to have. And then when you put a target in front of you, all of a sudden the whole thing of archery changes. Oh, now I'm shooting for a target. Yeah. So I want to achieve that, or I want to get there, right? Which I think is really key. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that, of course, you didn't put in the document, but I was thinking about this today, is doing this navigation of the goal setting with God, because we have this acronym: financial awareness creates empowerment, and really that's what you're helping us do today. You're actually helping us face, because people are listening today and think, I barely have enough to pay my X, Y, and Z right now with the economy the way it is. And, we've already talked about that. There are some people who have much and they come to you and they're able to do the planning like that. But I think one of the things I want to encourage people today is that even though this may feel out of reach, I think if you get financially aware and you take a document like you guys are providing and you actually prayerfully talk to the Lord about, how am I going to do this? What do you want me out of the savings that I am doing, putting this aside? How can I do this? And that's where the wisdom for this is, because some people might feel overwhelmed and just dismiss it. Don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss this conversation, because it's even if it's not for today, it might be for a month from now. You just don't know. You don't know where you're going to be receiving and to be
honest, I think you can start with $50. Like, you can start with $10. You can start with right.
True. But I just don't want people to dismiss the conversation, because including, I know that's, you meet all kinds of people who are of all kinds of faiths and no faiths. So you're not saying, do this with God, but we can say this here, that you can take a document like this and prayerfully consider, what do you want me to do with this, Lord?
I like that. And in fact, I know it's a little bit off topic, but I think it relates. As you were speaking earlier, I think people confuse it. Hope is not a strategy that they should only adhere to, right? We have hope that God will take care of us, and there's a future, and it's a prosperous one, right? But hope on its own blind hope, I guess is maybe more clear. And that's actually where the name Crosspoint comes from, right? Is we want to define, well, there's a slightly hidden, subtle Christian meaning to it, but the real one is what's the target, right? Our logo is a compass, meaning we're going to navigate people, help people navigate to a point in the future and define what is that goal? What's the purpose of this money that we're managing for people? And our clients will clearly know what's their cross point, meaning we'll plot a chart, just like the pension plan example would do, saying they know we have to have this much money by this date and maintain that level to pay all those incomes. We do that individually for each of our clients, saying, where am I going to be by X age, or where do I have to be? And we'll plot the actual attainment of that year in and year out. And if they are over target, they've crossed the cross point, they've achieved, or they're either on track or they've achieved how much they need in order to fund the lifestyle that they've hoped to have.
And again, we're coming to the end of the show.
I know, and we have not hit all the topics.
But we're at the planning part, and I think this is really key. Like, we started with the understanding, right? So we get an education, and then we've just been talking last year about planning, and then there's 2 more steps that we'll get to in the next show. But this idea of the plan is unique, as you said, Brent. And so it's really fun then to go, I'm not looking at anybody else's targets. I'm looking at the targets that I feel before the Lord, or with my spouse, or even as a family, you can start setting some targets to say, okay, so if we have enough to live on at this point, then what do we do with the rest if there is more, right? And that's where, of course, we have a show sponsor in CNCF, so I'm tagging that in there to say,
if you have more than
guess
enough.
what? If you have, oh my goodness, we're getting all over the place. But if you do, then that is actually part of the estate planning. Then to say, okay, I know I can live on this amount of money. I've talked to Brent and his team, and they're doing it. Actually, I'll back it up. Talked to Dave and Reb at More Than Enough, and we got all of that going. Then I talked to Brent, and he made that cross point. And then I connected in CNCF, the Canadian National Christian Foundation, to do that stewardship planning. What do we do with the extra stuff, whether that's end of life or whether that's approaching end of life? CNCF is going to make a plan with you on that. So there you go. I pulled it all together here at the end of the show.
Thanks to CNCF for sponsoring the show. But I want to leave a thought from James, because this came up a lot in COVID, and that there's a word from James that says, when you say, I'm going to do this and that and make this and that business plan in the year ahead, if you do it, all such boasting is evil. Instead, you should say, as the Lord wills. And that's where including God in our conversations about this is so important. And you give us very wise counsel, Brent. And like the word says in Proverbs, we go to others for wise counsel, because in a multitude of counselors we'll find our way. So, so let's talk money. We're going to keep the conversation going next week when we talk money.
Let's Talk Money is a division of More Than Enough Financial Fitness, where God is transforming hearts and bringing hope for today and freedom for tomorrow. For more information or to comment on today's show, please visit morethanenough.ca.